This sequential community autoethnography draws upon stories of 7 academics and becoming academics related to their pilgrimage, either secular or religious. The autoethnographic contributions were written sequentially, with authors having sight of each autoethnography as they were written. It is worth mentioning that all participants are either Welsh or have completed their pilgrimages within Wales, which gives a particular socio-cultural context to the journeys. The first contribution, Jason's, relates to a kayaking trip within the liminal space that is neither sea nor land off the coast of Anglesey, an island on the North Wales coast in the UK. This account is countered by an Anglican priest, Kevin, living in the same area of Wales. The third, Alex's, relates to a post-Catholic inner journey that consisted of an expedition to a beauty spot with Hare Krishna devotees. And the fourth, Simon's, a long-dreamed-of pilgrimage to the grave of a musical hero. The fifth, Tina's, and sixth, Jonathan's contributions deal respectively with the pilgrimage of extreme athletes to the Ironman event held in Tenby, a coastal town in South Wales, and a marathon cycling event from London to Paris. The final autoethnography, Lizzie's, mine, relates to a long-awaited, non-religious pilgrimage to a religious place, a monastic island off the coast of South Wales. The diversity of the journeys allows us to consider the contemporary nature of pilgrimage.
At sea, in my kayak, as it moves rhythmically along with the swell and fall of the waves, I listen to the sound of the gentle chop slapping the bottom of the boat and the smell of the fresh sea air. My paddles are resting across the cockpit as I scan the coastline and the group of students travelling along it. A wave kicks up over the bow of my kayak and across the spray deck, pushing the salty spray into my mouth. The students are travelling in small clusters. This journey an integral part of their outdoor adventure leadership degree. Sea kayaking, after all, at its very core is adventurous. Being here and now off the coast of Wales in a sea kayak is potentially dangerous undertaking. Campbell's monolith, or the adventurous journey, is often employed to give meaning and structure to these journeys that we undertake. The leaving the shoreline symbolises that departure from the ordinary world, heading out to face the trials and challenges before making it home. The wild, unpredictable environment is a key part of the journey and its reward. Out here, even the temporal dimensions are at odds as we plan our journey along the coast in relation to tides and weather conditions, natural time rather than of a watch. Staying safe whilst on this journey by sea kayak may be seen as liminoid, much as being along the coastal waters can be, neither at sea nor on land. Safe passage is less easily taken for granted in these settings than when travelling by land, and therefore providing new insights to oneself. This is much an adventure as a pilgrimage, not one to a symbolic geographical location, more of a wandering pilgrimage, one to an internal destination. After all, this is a circular route where we finish where we started geographically. And departure sees us both travelling further from home and towards home simultaneously. So maybe the destination is not geographical, but metaphorical, and the destination is inside of us, as Campbell's monolith may suggest. Being at sea, here and now, is a liminal state between pilgrim and adventurer.
My journey refers to a walk I took in Brecken exploring the Hare Krishna movement with a group of Hare Krishna devotees. Driving up to Brecken, we were all sat in the car and discussing our lives and choices we made that brought us up to this moment. But in a twist of irony, the journey actually started, the walking leg of the journey started at Brecken Cathedral. And this was ironic for me because I'd grown up attending a Roman Catholic church back in the city. And I didn't have great experiences there given my queer identity. And it was interesting to be on this journey exploring our spiritual selves, even though after my experience in the Catholic Church, I'd built up an identity of atheism. But during the walk, we came across this river, and the lead devotee gave an analogy that has since stuck with me. And he pointed at the river and he said, "This is the river, but that part of the river I was just pointing to has moved on. The river is constantly changing, but in essence, it always remains a river." And Similarly, our bodies and our lives are always changing and shifting, but there is continuity, which is the soul. This analogy, as well as the whole walk itself, is akin to the liminality described by Kevin and Jason already, but I felt conflicted in this experience, trying to reconcile my post-Catholic atheism and my growing affinity for Hinduism and the Hare Krishna community. But after the experience, I'm wondering what a simple walk can do to change me so much and so little at the same time.
Hi, my name's Simon Thomas, and I'm a researcher in pilgrimage. My story is called A Stairway to the Past. Many years ago, when I was 10, I read a story in a paper about a drummer with a rock band who had died. It was just a few days later that it suddenly struck me that this was the band that I'd heard in the background and had started to become aware of. This was 1980, and the drummer's name was John Bonham, and he played with a band called Led Zeppelin. From that point on, I became a huge fan of Led Zeppelin, as I'd stand in my bedroom, playing my guitar, pretending to be on some stage in some far-flung part of the world, like every young lad, I suppose. Over the years, it did occur to me on many occasions where John Bonham's grave may be, and if it indeed had become a site of a more secularised form of pilgrimage. I on many occasions came close to visiting. This person meant a lot to me and had meant a lot to me as I grew up, but never had actually got there. Just a couple of years ago, I arrived at John Bonham's grave in the small village of Rushock, to the west of Birmingham, to be hit by a sense of finally arriving at this place that had over the years meant so much to me, and it became something which I'd always wanted to visit, but I'd always had some fear about visiting. This was a man who had played a major and important part in my young life. On arriving, I felt a sense of completeness tinged with these ideas of liminality. I'd arrived, I was out of my zone, I was in a different place. Here I was. This was a great day.
Simon's mention of Led Zeppelin took me back to a crisp September morning in 2019 with AC/DC and the song Thunderstruck roaring out across Tenby's North Beach at the break of dawn. The steep descent from the cliff top to the beach, known as the Dragon's Fang, filled to capacity with thousands of wetsuit-clad athletes. The fizz of emotion in the air, anticipation, fear, excitement, and even relief gave me goosebumps. There's a sense of place on the beach, the only time and place in the entire day where everyone is congregated and rituals are performed in unison. As Simon highlighted in his work, a feeling as though you've arrived. But for me, this beach in this moment is a liminal space, one of 3 mandatory waypoints along the journey, but still an impossibly long way from the final destination, drawing us with the potential for both moral and spiritual transformation. An impassioned and disciplined year in the making just to be able to stand on the threshold between land and water in this very moment. For some, Tenby may conjure images of quaint seaside towns and fish and chips, but others are drawn here for an entirely different reason. The morning I describe is the start of Ironman Wales, legendary amongst the triathlon community. Considered one of the toughest, a place of pain and suffering, but also great reward, a rite of passage into the world of long-distance triathlon, and the accolades that come with it if you cross the finish line. I've finished Ironman races before, but not this one, not ever. On this day, I'm merely an observer of fleeting moments of thousands of others as they perform their rituals and begin their traverse through the Pembrokeshire countryside, testing the limits of body and mind. Are these pilgrims? I think they are, especially when drawing parallels between religion and sport. I see a religiosity associated with the Ironman triathlon, commitment and devotion to the journey to reach the sacred red carpet in Tenby, a devotion not only of the athletes, but also of the supporters, believers if you will, willing athletes to defy the limits of human endurance. For some, the finish line may be the end of the journey, transformation complete. However, for those that don't make it, I would argue this leaves them in a liminal space, neither here nor there, until their next pilgrimage to Tenby. Thank you.
Kevin, vicar in the church in Wales on the Llŷn Peninsula in the north of Wales. And many of my churches are actually on the Pilgrim Trail. And just this morning, I found a couple of pilgrims sheltering from the rain. So pilgrimage is definitely not quite secular for me. In fact, I find some secular notions of pilgrimage quite interesting. Previously, I used to be a vicar on Anglesey, and the two famous saints, as it were, Cubby and Serial. There is a walk that's often reenacted, and one of my churches was reputedly near the well at which they met. There have been many attempts to revive that walk, but seemingly without reference to the faith that the two saints shared. So it's a real puzzle. It's not that I don't get the need for people to be spiritual without faith, but sometimes the airbrushing out of, say, traditional Christian beliefs from pilgrimage remains something that is beyond me, I'm afraid. Nevertheless, I hope my places of pilgrimage are places of welcome where anybody can go at any time. I hope that they're places that are open, that they're places where questions can be asked and answered, and actually places where questions dare not to be answered to.
Never meet your heroes, they say, so I decided to ride in their tyre tracks instead. It's the third day and thus the third stage of our ride to Paris. I can't believe that just 2 days ago we were in London and chatting nervously about the ride. Hours of training in the gym and on the road and on my own, just getting in the miles, just getting in shape. I didn't want to let the team down on the ride. And the ride has taken me from the centre of London and brought me to the outskirts of Paris. We traverse as a peloton through the back streets of the suburbs and then along the west bank of the Seine, heading to the crossing that will take us to the Bois de Boulogne, where close on 100 riders will await the final ride into the city. We are told by the organisers that we are the second largest peloton in Paris that year, second only to the Tour de France. We'll enter the city with gendarmes on motorbikes as outriders, full sirens blazing. This is the stuff of boyhood dreams. I'm following in the footsteps of my heroes. Gods one and all. Indurain, Coppi, Fignon, and yes, even Pantani and Armstrong. I'm on the same streets of Paris in a peloton, with my sons riding in my team with me. It's powerful stuff. The brief given by the organiser was short and to the point. Stay close and don't fall off, he said. And then he turned to me and very quietly he took my shoulder and he said, "This is the dream for people like us. It will be emotional." Just as the ride into Paris on the final stage of the tour is a processional one, so was ours. We rolled off heading towards Avenue Foch, upping the speed to 35k. I looked up and saw the arc, and then it hit me. Whatever it was, full-on emotion. I'd made the grade, made the ride. I had my sons close, my mother in my heart, and my heroes in my head. The sprint along the Champs-Élysées was a blur of pavements, of people, of faces, my liminal space. It was like a silent out-of-body experience. I saw everything, felt my tears on my face, and I heard nothing. Then it was all over, done and dusted. Grouping with the team cars under the Eiffel, emotion exercised, pilgrimage made, memories cast.
I'd longed to visit Caldy Island, home to Cistercian monks for over 1500 years, a tranquil and peaceful place off the South Pembrokeshire coast of Wales. I had imagined hooded monks wandering around, hands clasped in prayer, and tourists buying the lavender soap and chocolate made and sold on the island. This then was my pilgrimage, a journey for non-religious purposes to a religious place with friends. We travelled on a small boat, disembarked and made our way up a wooded path with green-tinted shade, wildflowers and the occasional bench for weary travellers. We were aware of being in a religious space because the atmosphere seemed to demand a respectful quietude. We split up into couples to walk the island, and when we met for lunch, we talked about what we'd seen. We spent some quiet, reflective time in the Priory, yomped across fields to get to the lighthouse with magnificent sea views, laughed at the mischievous red squirrels, and enjoyed a convivial lunch under the shade of an oak tree. The visit typified liminality. I was not in my own natural environment, but neither was I part of the monastic community that I was visiting. I was, however, calmed and nurtured by the quiet beauty of the island and the vastness of the surrounding sea. I always find watching the sea therapeutic. It makes me appreciate my insignificance and lets me tap into a sense of innate spirituality. This was neither a religious nor a secular experience, but one which sat on very blurred boundaries, combining the two elements without being positively one nor the other. Our pilgrimage complete, my friends and I often talk about our visit, and I believe, in the spirit of communitas, that our shared experiences have brought us closer, just like pilgrims of old. We find that the themes of anticipation and awakening emerge in these contributions alongside a strong focus on liminality, the occupation of a position on both sides of a boundary, whether physical or virtual. The theme of travel, in some cases strenuous, has parallels with tourism activities, although there also appears to be a spiritual dimension to the experiences described. Liminality is described reflexively and is therefore multi-layered and stratified through time, emotion, and anticipation. We note that some of the contributions relate to a pilgrimage of the mind, with some of the more strenuous, endorphin-fueled activities bringing an internal liminality related to physical exhaustion. We find that both the journey and the destination becomes a stage gate for reflection and meditation, and this further extends the theme of liminality. Furthermore, we see the emerging theme of communitas and the social nature of pilgrimage and the importance of companionship on the pilgrim's journey. Finally, but outside of this submission, we consider collectively the journey that each of us has made in the writing of these autoethnographies and the way in which we have collaborated with and been influenced each by the others. Thank you for watching. Diolch am wylio.